Okay, all right. Good morning, and thank you so much for attending this meeting of the Bond Oversight Committee, April 20th. We have members here present at the Military Tribute Place versus CSD, as well as members online. And so I'm not sure where the speakers are. If we need to project our voices, please let me know if you can hear us okay. So would like to first start with a roll call, if we can. Patty Charlton, Chair, is here. Al Lopez.
Here.
Gina Blackman-Taylor.
I'm here.
Thank you. Abraham Mayo.
Here.
Dave Flatt.
Here.
Michael Flores. Byron Goins.
Present.
Thank you. Rob Gerdison. Chad Conrad.
Here.
Thank you. Nicole Lehman Donata.
Here.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you. I'm sorry about your name. I know I apologize. Destroyed it. And Yvette Williams. Ms. Williams?
It's Trustee Williams, Katie Williams.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Trustee. I was looking also for member Yvette Williams. I think she should be joining us. She asked for the link. Thank you, Trustee Williams, for being here as well.
Thank you.
So first, would like to lead agenda item 1.01, the flag salute. And ask First Chair, Mr. Lopez, if you could do this, please. Do we have it? Yeah, right.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so next we have agenda item 1.02, adoption of the agenda. Is there any public comment regarding the agenda? Seeing none. A motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. That's my second. Second.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the first by Mr. Lopez and the second by Mr. Flatt. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Any abstentions? Seeing none. Today. We will first move to agenda item 2.01, approval of the minutes. These reflect we have the minutes from our February 16, 2023 meeting, and then I'll ask a clarifying question on the March 23rd. First, is there any public comment regarding the approval of the minutes that were posted? Seeing none. Thank you. And so looking for a motion for the approval of the February 16, 2023 minutes.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. A second?
Second.
Mr. Flatt. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition? Any abstentions? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. And so the March 23rd meeting, we were not able to have a meeting due to lack of quorum. Do we still need to approve those by form? Okay. So we will approve the March 23rd, which was a non-meeting meeting.
Motion to approve the non-meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. A second? Dave, thank you so much. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposition? Any abstention? Seeing none. Okay, so next we will move to agenda item 2.02, reports by the chair and or liaison representatives. First, wanted to see if there is any public comment. Seeing none. We will move into our reports. And so first we'd like to start with Chad Conrad, our finance and investment liaison. Chad.
Thank you. Not a lot to add today. Mr. Phelps and I started the process of pulling information so I could review the administrative costs. Ronnie got me some some data in a file, and I'm in the process of working through that, and then we're going to schedule a meeting after this to review questions that I have on those. So focusing that area right now, nothing else.
Thank you. And I do apologize, the screen is behind me. I'm not sure if we will know if there are questions from each of the members for each of our liaisons. Are there any questions for Chad Conrad today? All right, Chad, thank you so much. Abraham Camejo and Al Lopez, construction.
Hello, everybody. Abraham, for the record, I was able to meet with Brenda Samara, trustee, and some high school students that brought up to our concern that they would like to have facilities take a look at having the bottled water water fountains installed at a few of their high schools. So one of the high schools was Desert Pines, and it was actually about 6 different high schools. I believe it's newer facilities are getting these fountains installed already. But these students did bring them up. I did mention to them that they should make a formal request through their SOT boards, and then that way, and then contact us as well so that we can put it on the agenda and then have facilities take a look at it. They were wondering if they can get a price breakdown, how much it would cost to install these water fountains, and who would be responsible for installing them. Questions were brought up as, would it require a union plumber, or can the school hire their own plumber, or can the school facilities repair guy do the installation itself? So these were questions that were brought up. I can provide a list of these exact schools of all of them to Valerie later through our email communication. And then also another topic that was brought up for discussion would be some parents and a lot of community members are bringing up the discussion on incorporating metal detectors at our schools for future builds and our current builds for security reasons to be implemented as a security measure through our security systems that we currently have already, our single point entry, and using the security devices that are already in place at our schools, and possibly providing more metal detectors for the schools that don't have any. I would suggest maybe inviting a representative from the school police and facilities, and maybe our superintendent and other trustee members and other community members for this discussion to see if it's something that we can look at and move forward with it, depending on the community conversation of for it or against it. But there's a lot of push regarding this, especially after the incident at Nashville. So I do want to point, this is not a topic of guns or anything, but this is just an added measure for security for our schools, and it would be a discussion. So I just want to see how you guys feel about that and see if we can move forward and invite the right people to that conversation. Maybe have a town hall meeting type of deal where we can have this conversation and invite these high school students to voice their opinions, and also our staff and anybody else that would like to give their opinion on it.
Yeah, thank you, Abraham. And so first wanted to have Mark give an opportunity for a response, and then someone on a related note, I actually have a question for Gina Blackman-Taylor as our community and government relations person. So Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Mr. Camejo, I can address both of those. The first one's much easier for us to address if it's I think it would be good to work through the email that you suggested and send that to Valerie. We can get more specific, but broadly speaking, many of our schools have already on their own gone through their SOT and the site-funded process to put in bottle filling stations. We have a really good rhythm of executing those projects when the schools request them. So, but we can provide more information on that through your email. I think the metal detector discussion starts at the superintendent's office with the trustees, and then they will direct the right level of meeting and the right groups, that's not a facilities decision. We might help execute that, but we would certainly be happy to be part of the meeting.
Well, regarding with facilities, because we are moving forward with building new schools, 5 years, 10 years, and so forth, with technology moving forward and incidents happening throughout this country, we should have this discussion within our facilities to see if we can start incorporating this technology into our architectural designs for the future. It's just a matter of time before this headache hits our school district. And it is happening. Our school district does have many incidents. After Nashville, the next very day, we did have an incident at Shadow Ridge High School. So this is a conversation that we should be having, and facilities. And I believe this board that does hold the bonds for the future construction should be having these meetings, especially with our superintendent and everybody. So that's why I believe a community town meeting type of deal with everybody to voice these opinions and show studies and move forward with all the board of trustees. I think that conversation needs to happen sooner than later.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, in that regard, and I appreciate very much what you're saying. I know that Mr. Bergeson's not here, and he is our liaison for architecture. And so he does help with some of the design prototypes. And I know that they're in the process, not sure what the status is for the new elementary, middle, and other levels, but he is participating in that process, correct?
I believe so.
Okay, so perhaps we can ask Mr. Bergeson to give us an update on how that's being included. And so don't know if there's any questions or any comments.
Madam Chair, there's no questions here, but as the trustee, may I interject in this conversation?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, trustee.
Thank you. Hey, I apologize for not being there in person. It's really tough for me to get down there during the middle of the day. But we did actually have this conversation. I actually did bring this question up as far as the water fountains go to the superintendent in a one-on-one. There are millions of dollars in carryover funds for each one of these school sites, and water fountains is at that point, it's a school site-based decision. With that being said, unless we use Clark County's funds to incorporate them all the way through all of the schools, the principals would have to use their carryover funds due to AB 469. These are site-based decisions, so there's that conversation. I'd also like to make the quick point that I do agree with metal detectors in schools. However, I'd like to also make the indication, or I guess the delineation of the Shadow Ridge incident. I think it's really important to notate that that incident was not a student with a gun, nor was it near the school. It was actually across the area, but because of Nashville, that incident that happened, everybody was on high alert, and therefore it does tend to get a little out of the way. I'm not saying that's a conversation that we shouldn't have. I just want to make sure it's an accurate conversation.
Thank you, trustee.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. I appreciate that. I will relay that the carryover funds should be used with the email, and I'll loop you in on that email as well. And then if I can reach out to you later, maybe we can talk further in discussion regarding these metal detectors and see how we can move forward to answering all the communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. Any additional questions for Abraham or for Al?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Williams?
I would like to be recorded as present. I'm sorry, I'm a few minutes late. So I came in kind of on when you were talking about having town halls and so forth. Are we just speaking about security in general, or are we talking about just the technology? Where are we in this discussion? Because I'm thinking that something that I did want to ask about is appropriate now, but I'm not sure.
So this was specific to the construction update from our liaison, and I think if we wanted a broader conversation, perhaps we can include that with Ms. Blackman-Taylor. Is it related to the construction conversation?
It wouldn't be new construction, it would be repairs.
Yeah, I think this might be a good time.
Okay, so I would like to ask the question around our auditoriums, our gymnasiums. I am running across a number of schools that I've been in recently where a half of the bleachers are broken, so they're only able to use one half of their gym. And it is CCSD policy that when they have games, that the visiting team, for security reasons, has to sit on the other side. And I did verify that with central office that that was our policy. And so my concern is some schools more than others, I'm more concerned that you have visiting teams, students sitting amongst the other opposing team where fights occur. So for safety and security reasons, and just to make sure that we're keeping as safe an environment as we can, I'd like to ask facilities if they can give us, then you don't have to do it right now because I'm sure you have to go and look. How big of a problem is this? How many schools do we have where their gymnasiums, they can only use one half of them because due to bleachers? We have a lot of money available to do these repairs. This is the time for us to do these things. So can you do that at a later date? Provide us with kind of an update on which gymnasiums are having this problem or have a need for their bleachers to be repaired?
Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, Ms. Williams, we can do our best to find that information. Yes, I'll have to work with all of our facility managers to kind of build that.
Okay. I thought it.
We would expect that there would be work orders placed for that type of issue. So it might be easy for us to dig up the ones that we know are broken.
Okay.
If the school has submitted a work order.
Okay, because at first there was one school in particular, and I already asked about that. But since then, I've been to several other schools, and they've all expressed the same issue. And so I'm like, well, how big of a problem is this? So thank you so much. I appreciate you getting back to us on that.
Thank you very much. Now moving on to our liaison for site selection and land use, Mr. Flatt.
Thank you. I was lucky enough to get to visit with Mr. Baldwin and his staff on March 2nd, and they presented me with a presentation of what land use looks like and what some of the plans are. And I really think that I want to thank Mr. Baldwin for taking the time to be able to do that for us. So, and nothing else to report this time.
Are there any, I guess I would like to just ask a quick question. Do we know if there are gaps in available land as we're looking to expand or need new schools? Have those been outlined?
I don't think that was brought up. I think we talked that there was some holes but yeah, it looks, from the presentation I had, it was just what we have right now.
Okay, so it's just current inventory, not necessarily perspective with growth.
Rick, there is some growth in it.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, yes, we have sites available for future growth for the near term.
Not the long term.
If I can,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Mr. Mayor.
I ran for the record. I was able to meet with some of the city council from the city of Las Vegas, and we were actually invited to meet with their developers there regarding the land that's being developed on the old Desert Pines golf course. So they want to see if we can incorporate a elementary or middle school of a special design within that land, because they are going to be building affordable homes and different homes in that vicinity. So I just wanted to let you know that they want to have a meeting, and if we can how can we facilitate that and get everybody on board so they can meet with those developers and regarding that available land that can be possibly used for a construction site for a school within that new community that's being considered.
So process-wise, perhaps Mr. Campbell, Mr. Baldwin, how is that typically done in those relationships with the municipalities and then looking at new home development?
So Madam Chair, members of the commission, so the city staff is very familiar with our staff and they should reach out to us. We have received their site development plan for that project. However, we have not received any communication from them with desires for a site or an elementary / middle school that you're discussing. So they have not presented that to us. We'd be very interested in listening to that conversation.
How can we coordinate to meet? Who's the person?
Chris Dingle is Director of Real Property Management.
And then can I get the contact from you after the meeting? Of course, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Flatt. Are there any questions remotely regarding site selection land use? Okay, hearing none.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I was late
Williams.
Jumping in. No, when you said that, then it dawned on me. What are there any future plans that would be new information for us in District F? That would be more of the Spring Valley area, Southwest? Because I know our community is growing, so I'm just always trying to stay on top of kind of what's coming. Is there any new developments or plans for anything new?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Ms. Williams, my presentation later in this on this agenda will cover some of that and more,
Okay.
really looking more on a global district scale.
Okay.
Currently, I'll go over what we currently have planned throughout the district.
No problem. We can wait. I can wait.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So moving on to Ms. Blackman Taylor, Community Government Relations. Gina.
Hi, thanks. I don't have too much to report. There's a lot of things, again, that are just still up in the air. But related to that safety question, I've tried looking a little bit through Nellis, but I was hoping that Mark or facilities would have a better answer. Or I don't see any bill language that's regarding greater funding for capital safety measures. Is that accurate, or is there a bill that I should be keeping my eye on for capital expenditures regarding safety in schools?
Yeah, so
Ms. Blackman Taylor, at this time, I don't believe we are aware of any additional funding on the capital side.
Okay, I didn't think so. I just wanted to kind of make sure that I wasn't missing something. This is what Abraham brought up has resurfaced a conversation that I remember having a few years ago with Jeff regarding some of the site-based or site-funded projects. I would like to talk to you guys going forward about creating some sort of infographic or informational piece that we can share through the SOT structure that gives schools and particularly parents who are sometimes the driver of some of those kind of outside requests, that knowledge of that process and sort of like those examples of what goes through that site funded selection and putting it in a way that it gets in front of kind of the budget and most engaged folks at these individual schools, just to kind of help smooth over, I think, some of the navigation through the processes. Because I have come across, even at the elementary and middle school where my kids attend, I have come across like some confusion over available pathways for different improvements. So, Abraham brought up a couple of schools that are talking about one particular item, but I think coming up, I'd like to talk to you guys about coming up with something that we can share with the SOTs as they come back for the new year and they start talking about what they might want to do in the future.
Ms. Blackman Taylor, I can address that. We have a currently operating what we call a principal working group around site funded projects, and that's a kind of a dialogue that facilities has with, I think, about 8 principals from across the district to talk about how we can optimize that process and make it clear. So we are currently developing, and we already have a draft of a document that does make it clear what is a site-funded project, what is not a site-funded project. Because there's always going to be a little bit of a gray area in between, versus where it should just be a maintenance task. And in some cases, in theory would be a maintenance task, but it's just not something that maintenance has the budget for, and therefore the school sometimes makes a choice to move forward with it as a site-funded project. So we are working on a document that I think it's not so much an infographic, but it would be as clear as we can be, a description of how to do a site-funded project, but more importantly, what is a site-funded project. So yeah, we'd be happy to share that with the BOC once we have a format that works for the principals.
That'd be great. And then do you know on your kind of internal communication and how we can make that something that then is shared specifically with the SOTs? I find that there can be a communication, breakdown between kind of what happens on that internal to external level. And in my experience, I feel like the SOT mechanism is one that it could be used more often, sitting on those SOTs for the elementary school and the middle school where my kid attends. Like it can be an underutilized resource for sharing information to schools. And I don't know what the internal processes for CCSD is in terms of like maybe pushing out information through an SOT system.
Ms. Blackman-Taylor, I'd be happy to work with you, and also then I'll communicate with our teaching and learning group to find out the best way to do that. From facility standpoint, we typically wouldn't communicate with the SOT like that directly, but we can come up with something. Wouldn't be a problem.
Awesome. I'd love to follow up on that conversation with you, Mark, if that's possible. And then kind of that final part when we were talking about town halls, and unfortunately Rob isn't here today. I know he was here last month. I don't know where we are at in terms of having those town halls regarding the design process. My latest notes show that it was going to be when there was essentially a certain percentage reached of design structure, but I kind of feel like there's 2 approaches for kind of the safety town hall conversation that Abraham's having, which is one is that we've already talked about what some of these designs are, and I think seeing where we are on that already gives us a structure of kind of addressing that safety question through what we had talked about being these kind of public input town halls regarding some of these new designs that were coming up, where safety would then just be one portion of the overall conversation.
Yeah, Gina, this is Patty. I agree that we had that conversation about at a certain point in the design process, having an opportunity to review the final design or the proposed design, or is that moving forward, or where are we at in that process?
Just want to defer to you on where we are.
So I think we are at a good point. We can bring that in probably the next couple of meetings to share out the final designs on the 2 elementary school prototypes. And I'd say probably a good point where we can share a not quite final, but rough design of where we're at on the middle schools. I don't want to say rough, but we're still probably about 60% through development on that one.
Yeah. Thank you. To that point, I know I'd had a conversation with Gina in advance, just as our liaison, just wondering if we knew where any of the legislation might be moving forward. I know that there is some school safety legislation where that is, whether or not there's a capital component or, and I think I heard no at this particular point in time, but there may be, I like to term them as unfunded mandates, where there are certain things that the school district may have to do that may not have an appropriation tied to it. Are you monitoring those legislative, and I know she was looking through Nellis and so was I.
Yeah.
But I know that there was a big deadline last week, so we're not quite sure what moved forward and what
Yeah.
didn't. So do you have any update for us on that?
Yeah, Ms. Charles, and I can speak broadly, only broadly in the sense that I think we reviewed 4 or 5 BDRs that all had a different aspect of adding prevailing wage across different trades and different types of work to public works projects. And so very, very possibly those coalesce into 1 or 2 BDR, bills that get considered. And so our comments have generally just been, we're neutral on the subject, just to note that, if it does add cost to the project, which it could in some cases, if we're not paying prevailing wage on that already, it could just add to the cost of our projects that are on a fixed bond amount.
Yeah, and so then on the school safety component, is that something that facilities has been involved in, or was that your comment that no, not to this point?
Yeah, to this, from a capital standpoint, in terms of mandating things for the district to do, I'm not aware of anything.
Rodney Phelps for the record. Members of our budget team go through the BDRs that are provided by our government finance department as well. They sit there, they review them, anything that has any impacts potentially to certain departments are usually filtered out to that department to answer the question, such as Mark was explaining. So in those cases, they knew it had prevailing wage involved, so they're asking that question, say, how much would this approximately cost the school district if we implemented this? Sometimes you can figure that information out, sometimes you just have to give a response that'll have a material impact.
Okay, understood, thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Blackman-Taylor? Chad?
I have
Hold on, just before I wrap up, I just want to really kind of emphasize that I really believe in the model of that town hall as a way of getting public input in a way that allows them to have a dialogue back and forth, because it doesn't feature the same constraints that public comment at a public meeting does. And so I just want to reiterate, and I don't think I'm alone on that, on the committee, that that public input becomes really important as a factor in kind of getting that approval for those final designs and getting that public buy-in as well. So I just continue to support that process. We've seen it be successful already within the structure of the Bond Oversight Committee, and I just urge that we continue to move forward on those opportunities whenever we can.
Justin, I don't know if you wanted to respond.
I think there's always a series of public meetings that happens in regards to all of our designs, where one is very focused with the school and people in the community are notified of that particular school, and then there's all of the other processes associated with each entity, whether it's like with the county town board and then the planning commission. So there tends to be 2 to 3 public meetings around all of our design and our prototypes when they go as we build them.
Do you have a schedule for those?
I'd have to find them for each project. Yes.
Gina, does that help?
It does. I do want to make a distinction between that public meeting process, which is every public meeting that is done that way is still bound by those rules of not being able to respond to a public comment, or, where I think it does continue to feed into ideas that the sense that like perhaps decisions are already made, or the public comment that they have doesn't maybe have an impact or matter to the decisions that get made. And so, and I think the only drawback I see in terms of when it becomes very specific to a specific school is when we're talking about a a process like this where that first design is one that will be implemented on many schools, and yet it's the only thing the pitfall I'd like to avoid is like, oh, because this design will first be used in X school, that X school is the one that has like kind of that most opportunity to kind of weigh in. Whereas I think some of these general designs, are that we were told before that there would be an opportunity to have a town hall format for public input and conversation about these designs before they had that final approval. And I continue to maintain that I think that is a valuable process to go through.
Yeah, and I wish that Mr. Gergerson was here, and I just wanted to make sure, I know we were talking about bringing the prototypes back to this body, and I just, yeah, perhaps we can have further discussion with Rob Ferguson on that. But yeah, but understand that to every point that we can get more input, I know that we feel like that's what we should be doing and how we can maximize that opportunity, especially on design. Because once you get a prototype, they're going to be used on multiple schools. So it'll be all across the valley as well. So I certainly agree with what Gina's saying. Just I wish we had Mr. Ferguson here who's been actively involved in that process. So. Chad.
I did see Michael Flores jump on, so as he is another community relations and he's an expert, I didn't know if he wanted to share anything while we were still on that topic, or not that topic, I mean the area of government relations.
Gina, can I ask for just 1 second, because I know Chad has a question for you? And then we'll turn to Michael.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were moving on to Chad as a presentation. I'll answer a question from Chad any day.
No, he has a question for you.
No, and actually, I think Gina read my mind a little bit, because I did, and not to dwell on this topic more than necessary, but I did want to zero in a little bit on just understanding Gina. I'm probably a little bit slower than Gina, because I didn't quite understand the response for the town hall meetings. So just to clarify for myself, it sounded like you were Justin, you were talking about scheduling meetings for, or at least I thought we were talking about scheduling meetings for like the design process, right? Like you get to a certain percentage, certain point in designing the different prototype schools, and then I'm on the same page with Gina. I think we had understood that there was going to be some public forum where whether it's community or schools or whoever, anyone, town hall that wanted to show up would be able to kind of ask their questions, give their input, right? And then you take that into consideration. But then I think you followed up with a comment that was more specific to individual projects or individual schools where you'd be taking meetings on the school itself. Can you just clarify for me how you see that working, or what do you see the outcome being? Like what are you looking for from these meetings? And I'm just wondering if it's the same thing as what we're talking about here.
I can speak to that, Mr. Conrad. So I think what Justin was referring to is the standard process we go through in building a new school in the community, right? So understanding what Ms. Blackman-Taylor is asking about, that's a different type of process that, frankly, I'm not sure is one that we've really undertaken. That would be something we would need to work with our Office of Communications and our Chief of Staff as far as setting up town halls, similar to how they did the town halls at the end of March around the entire school budget. I don't think that's a bad idea. It would be a different workflow than we've had before. Our current group of individuals that's working with Justin are, I believe, almost all internal to CCSD regarding prototype designs and ultimately our educational specs. And so a lot of that is driven by CCSD regulations, similar to the ones that we've been talking about in this body, but there's at least one more. So yeah, so what Ms. Blackman-Taylor's talking about, what you're asking about would be a different type of item. And like I said, there's a couple topics that could come up and be discussed, and we would just need to figure out the right way to do that.
Yeah, and just to follow up, that was consistent with, I think, what the flow of the conversation was. We know that we also had similar town halls as it related to the vision.
Yep.
That got brought forward. And so it was just one more opportunity to participate because it had been some time since new prototypes had been developed. And it's not necessarily, I mean, this is where you really kind of get the look and feel of the facility is gonna look like what the school is. And we know that it's not so much the ingress, egress, that's all part of overall, but it would just be looking at those components. So if you could, I think that's exactly where the bond oversight was at, and then also bringing those final designs back so that we could showcase all the great work that's come forward with the schools as well as with the architecture firms that are selected and your team as well. But that was where we were heading and what we had asked for, as I remember.
Okay.
So does that make sense, Gina?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit surprised by the comments because I feel like this has been an ongoing and previously spoken expectation. It's from several meetings before. So I'm the idea of having a town hall around design. I mean, I have notes of that from 6 months ago, 5 months ago. I mean, it maybe there's just been a broad miscommunication around this. But yeah, I mean, in terms of our role, which if I understand it, is that we would eventually vote on making a recommendation to the Board of Trustees on the acceptance of these designs, or is that, I mean, I don't know if there's a voting part of what bond oversight's thing is, and kind of regardless of whether or not I'm a part of any vote that would submit this for approval. I just think that in terms of the process, providing a mechanism for the public to ask questions in a way that their questions can be answered and have a conversation has been a very valuable process in the past. And my understanding was that we were already anticipating that happening with the design process, and that we were just waiting, because I also understand how doing that when there's 10% of a design or 20% or whatever is not necessarily as productive. But I feel like this entire time we've been waiting for these designs to reach the percentage at which point there was a feeling of comfort in sharing that to the public in order to receive that input. So I guess I'm just a little like surprised at of that. But I mean, regardless, it's not too late to go forward with that process. So just to echo what Patty was saying and what Chad is saying, and the conversations that I've had with others, including Rob, I think the expectation was very much that there would be some opportunity for these decisions to finalize.
Ms. Blackman-Taylor, Justin and I will take the action item to communicate with those internal offices about how we might set up a town hall, like what you're speaking about, and then we will report back to the BOC.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. So Michael, thank you. Michael Flores, thank you for joining us. And just wanted to see if you have anything to add on the community government relations side as a liaison. Hearing that. So maybe we lost Michael. I think one thing, I just had a question, Mr. Campbell, as a follow-up. I know that this is probably that segment, but there's a reference in one of your comments about just kind of the policies and the regulations. Do you have any update for us today on where we are with those that our team is involved in?
Yeah, we are developing a draft internally on the regulation, which has been our priority. At this time, we don't have one to share yet back with Member Williams and Ms. Blackman-Taylor, but we are working to get them a draft as soon as we can.
Okay. And then do we have a ETA on when that draft might be ready? And then I think we also had, correct me if I'm wrong, and I apologize, I've missed a couple meetings, but Mr. Gertison and Nicole, or Rob and Nicole, were also working on one
Yes.
with you as well. So
Yes,
what's the
there's
status of those?
The policy, like I said, we've been prioritizing the regulation, which
Okay.
is more, in my mind, more relevant to our current discussions at the BOC. Unfortunately, we've been just slammed with lots of work around the unit, and so we would have liked to get that draft back last month. We're gonna try to get it back in May.
Okay, are there any questions for any of our liaisons and or the staff related to those areas? Okay, seeing none, we will move to agenda item 2.03, a report by the Park County Board of School Trustees Liaison. Trustee Williams.
Thank you. I don't have anything to report unless anybody has any questions. I think this has been a really, really great discussion. I just want to put that out there. So I appreciate you guys giving it your attention.
Great. Well, we are so grateful to have you here with us today at our meeting, either in person or remotely anytime. And we appreciate your participation and taking back this great conversation. Is there any, I apologize, is there any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, and that was a discussion. And again, thank you so much. Moving on to agenda item 2.04, the 2015 Capital Improvement Program Summary Status. Is there any public comment related to this item? Seeing none, Mr. Coates.
We can bring up exhibit 2.048, please. Not much has changed. We're at this revenue is $2.86 billion. We're currently working on the current POS for the next offering. Our expenditures to date, 2.36 billion, it's 164 million encumbered, giving us a total of $2.53 billion. It's accounted for. It leaves an available cash flow of $497.4 million and an available balance of $333.4 million. If we can move on to 2.4B, new format. The only item here is we got the 4 GMPs for the Northeast Kern Technical Academy. So that rose this project $1.2 million from our last estimate. So we're currently sitting at $205,679,000 as our projected cost for that school.
Comment, not really a question, but that's a pretty good savings. What do you think that has to attribute to anything related to the process? You said this was the 4th GMP. I know that's not something.
There's 4 phases, four phases on this project. So I believe one of them been sitting out there long. I just didn't know it to come in. Originally, we had probably put a high budget on this because we haven't built large schools in quite a time. As we went through the various design phases, that number kept coming down, and responded to that, saying that's what the OPCs were showing. And compared to the last OPC and what the 4 GMPs came in at, they were pretty close.
Yeah, and perhaps this is a follow-up for Justin, is that I think we actually went after a multiple GMP on this project. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's what you had shared because of the ability for the contractor to order some of those heavy lead time items and because of the environment that we were in. But is this something that you think has worked out quite well?
Yes, this has definitely been a benefit for us to help deal with the environment and procurement times that we're seeing right now. So we've been doing this quite a bit right now. So we did this on 2 elementary schools where we released electrical and mechanical and some structural portions early on in the project. And we're wrapping up the final 2nd GMPs on those to bring those to a close and start right into construction on that. And that's something that we're also exploring, how do we do this even in a hard bid situation? Right, whether that's a longer procurement time before we start construction, different things of that method. This is just, I'm going to say all the procurement and all the lead times are becoming exceptionally challenging. We're trying to make sure we plan for all of that.
Is it normal with a hard bid to do that because of the way that the hard bid process works, or does that maybe kind of lend itself a little bit more to the CMAR process?
With the hard bids, we just try to build in more time. That's something we've been doing with this program for the last 2 or 3 years, is really planning out everything. I want to say like elementary school used to be 1 year design, 1 year construction. We've been trying to do kind of two years design, 1.5 years construction with 6 months of lead time for procuring materials. So, and I will say, like, Clark County has done this a lot in the past, where they'll bid the entire project, but construction doesn't start until 6 months after the initial bid, so they're procuring and going through submittals and all that paperwork ahead of time.
So it takes a little bit longer under
Yeah.
that, well, actually, it sounds like a lot longer.
Really, it's just a level of concurrency. So with the CMARs, you've got a little more, you can compress and get a little concurrency through design and construction. But with good planning, we can be out ahead of that sometimes.
Questions for Rodney? Comments? Person
I
remote?
have- I have something, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
I just want to commend the team. We recently had, well, I was going to say it at our last month meeting, but since we didn't have that, didn't happen, I couldn't commend them. So I do want to take the opportunity to commend them, their facilities. They actually had a very good meeting related to the Matt Kelly Elementary School redesign, and the consultants were there that were hired as well, and had an opportunity to visit Global Academy and kind of see what they're doing and some of their best practices. And currently the consultant is planning community outreach and input. And so those promises that were made, facilities is really doing everything they can to make sure that they keep those promises to the community. And I just wanted to share that with the board because I know all of us are as concerned and wanting to make sure that that project is completed to the excitement of the community there, that it will serve. So thank you, team facility.
Awesome. I think we need a banner that says that, so feedback. Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much for that report. All right, so moving on to agenda item 2.05, outdoor air quality in relation to school facilities. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, turn it over to Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Ms. Charlton. If we could bring item 2.05 on the screen, please. So this document is a quick response to a request made from this committee in November last year around considerations on our current school sites as well as new school sites when it comes to environment. So what we've done here is broke down what we think are relevant to the discussion about our sites, starting with the acquisition of land to begin with and what CCSD does. In this business, we undertake what is called a phase 1 environmental site assessment before we take on land. And so this is really an environmental, an overall environmental assessment. It's more focused on the property itself and the conditions of the land and the nearby area to identify any issues that the district may encounter to remediate before being able to occupy it safely and construct safely. So we do work with contractors to obtain those phase 1s, and then our environmental services department internal to the district assists real property with evaluating those. Obviously, if anything is found in those, we are not accepting that land or purchasing that land. As we move on to notice of land use or air permits, this is an area where we work with the jurisdictions, but typically it's Clark County. When an air permit is going to be requested or modified in the area of the school, you could all be familiar with this because it also applies to any property owner in the area. So if we receive it, if we own the property or the Bureau of Land Management receives it, if it's BLM land, We evaluate those on a case-by-case basis, again, with our Environmental Services Department, which is headed by our Director, Lori Olson. And if we need to provide comment, provide feedback, whether it be positive, negative, or whatever, we do that, and we have done that in the past. And Ms. Williams will be familiar with that. The example was with our Spring Valley High School, where they did request to do more at that site. This was in the 2018 timeframe. And we did provide feedback that resulted in them making a significant number of changes to their plans, as well as operational changes to the facility, including walls and how they operate in terms of using water to keep dust down. And then we did modify our system at that school on the HVAC side to increase the filtration levels so that when we were bringing in outside air, it was more filtered. And so, again, that happens on a case-by-case basis, and we do respond as needed if development occurs.
Are those using ASHRA standards for that intake?
Yeah, so in that case, there was assessment done both outside and inside the school to see what we needed to do. And, you know, in that case, the high school with and this is a little maybe too deep, but yes, we had units that were able to take better filters. We call those MERV 14 filters without much modification to the unit itself. So it worked out well in that case. When we talk about concerns about outdoor air quality, again, I highlight our environmental services group, which addresses both concerns around indoor and outdoor air quality. We talked about indoor air quality in a prior VOC meeting and what we've been doing in those areas in terms of assessment. But anytime there's a concern with outdoor or indoor, typically it's through a work order that we respond, and we direct our schools to create those work orders to drive the work. And we have done assessments, both outdoor and indoor, and driven actions accordingly, whether it would be a need to change filters at a school. In some cases, we've recommended using carbon filters at a school if we had odors outside that need to be mitigated from our facility, or typically it's a neighboring action. And so finally, monitoring outdoor air quality. We have really strong partnership with the Clark County Department of Air Quality, and this is kind of their world. And so not only do we have our own permits for operating certain schools with the equipment that we have, you know, whether it be generators or cooling towers, but of course they enforce that and monitor that across the valley. And so they've done a really good job. This document, you know, if you link to it, it does provide hot links to their website as well as their monitoring dashboard. I provided a very simple snapshot on the back of this document about what that looks like. So they have outdoor air quality sensors across the valley that consistently monitor several different parameters. They're not always green. They are green in the snapshot that I happen to grab for this, but typically if it's, you know, windy, dusty outside, you'll see these readings reaching yellow or maybe even red, depending on where they're at. And so we work with them regularly. Like I said, if there are major air quality concerns, they apprise us of the situation, and then we work on air quality efforts if we need to. So that's the update.
Are there questions for Mr. Campbell?
Madam Chair, I do.
Okay, yes, Ms. Williams.
You know, this is an issue that I think I brought this one up, but we really have problems at Spring Valley High School. And I happen to live in this area, and Wells Cargo is there. And from time to time, the situation is worse, and sometimes it's better. So I have some questions as far as your process and procedures internally. You mentioned, for example, work orders. So you get work orders in. What if you don't get a work order in? Is there like a backup plan, or that if you don't get a work order from maybe an area where you know you usually have issues, do you then take the initiative to do a follow-up or a check, or what's the process as it relates to making sure that our schools are environmentally sound. And I ask that just because some administrators are better at that than others, and we know that they're very busy, and maybe that's not a priority. But for students and families, you know, you hear the complaints, and so can you just share kind of what do you have kind of an internal backup plan when it comes to monitoring?
So yes, I can address that. And, you know, it's twofold. I would say that right now, we do not have a broad network of internal air quality. So if you're speaking about in the schools, our main feedback points are temperature. In some cases, we have CO2 within the building. In terms of air quality, that's been a focus that we obviously turned our attention to in the wake of the COVID pandemic. And I talked a lot about what we've done in terms of, you know, bringing in outside air and increasing filtration and you know, really ensuring that our units are as, you know, functional, right? Functional design. So when it comes to outdoor air quality, we're typically driven by requests from the school or requests from the community. We don't really have a process where we sort of drive around and assess the outdoor air quality. So I know you had asked about a map. That's not something that we really keep track of, you know, large industrial facilities on the CCSD side. We rely on Clark County for that information and any type of, you know, issues that they may have. Like I said, they would be brought to our attention in that way. So we do take assessments of indoor air quality with our, you know, portable sensors, both on an as needed basis, but also, you know, just kind of as we are able to proactively assess schools, we do that as well, particularly our portable classrooms.
So whenever, as it relates to the monitoring, for example, at Spring Valley, with the extra filters, you know, some of the things that you've put in place to help mitigate, how often is that replaced? Is that on a schedule? Do you have that like on a schedule where it's seasonal? Like, for example, I have my air conditioner serviced and filters replaced and everything. Well, I do, my husband does the filters more often, but twice a year. So in the winter and in the summer, do we have like a schedule where particular, and I'm asking even in particular, it could even be specifically those schools that are located closer to commercial where there, you know, is more issues. I'm just wanting to understand better how we're kind of maintaining those kinds of resources to ensure a safer, healthier environment.
Yeah,
as best as we can get.
So yes, we do change the filters, and it really is based on the type of filter and the size and its capacity. So a filter like we have at Spring Valley, you know, typically can last more than 6 months because it's 12 inches deep and it's got lots of surface area, whereas some of our other schools that have a 2-inch type filter, we're replacing that every 3 or 4 months. What I will tell you is, you know, working with the filter crew, one thing we do know from empirical evidence is that the schools that kind of ring the valley typically need more frequent filter changes, because they are getting more outdoor contamination from dust and wind and things like that. So that's something that we do monitor and that we do know. And then we also have the ability, again, it simply depends on the technology at the site to actually measure, you know, the filter's level of load by the pressure drop across the filter. And so in those cases, we can know in real time if the filter needs to be changed. There will be an alarm that goes off to drive action. So a couple different ways that we do that.
Can you share a little bit about how, and I'm sorry, this is my last thing, I think. Can you share a little bit how you work collaboratively? And you mentioned also about, you know, what does that look like working collaboratively with them? And then what sustainability projects do you have underway with them? And specifically, is there any sustainability projects underway at Spring Valley High School?
I believe you're referring to Clark County, as I mentioned in the last
Yes,
section.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're monitoring out their air quality. You say that you You have a strong relationship with the Division of Air Quality and work collaboratively on air quality and sustainability projects. So I'm just wanting to get that a little more clarity on that.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate from the school district side to be involved in their all-in climate action plan, which just passed by their commission this month. So Clark County's, made a big effort. Their commissioners approved a broad valley-wide plan for addressing climate change, but air quality is a big piece of that. And so we work with them in a couple of different ways. As I mentioned, we're a permit holder as well. And so we work with them as we need to submit permits, and in some cases we need to modify or remove permits. Additionally, we work with them when it comes to the funds that they receive from air quality penalties. And so if you're not familiar with that, we receive the funds that are generated by their enforcement across the valley. And those funds are directed towards projects that improve air quality, and they're directed to the school district to do that. So we do several things with those funds, and typically it can range from $500,000 to $1 million a year that the district receives. And we use that for curriculum and education on the teaching and learning side for both teachers and students. We use that for, we've purchased a couple of electric school buses with that funding. We're currently instituting a lighting upgrade project, which is an energy efficiency and a broader efficiency project. And then we're working with them on, as I mentioned, the portable classrooms have been an area of focus for us for a couple of years. So we're working on a project with them to assess portable air quality and then make improvements and add energy efficiency measures to those portables as we find them. So those are the main areas that we work with them in terms of sustainability projects.
Is there anything that you're doing as it relates to maybe I bring up Spring, and I'm sorry I keep bringing up Spring Valley, but it is a real issue, and it's seasonal, and so we're approaching that season now. We're got a lot of pollen now, and with a lot of things, and then more activity as with the buildings, more construction work. And so then Wells Fargo is a lot busier over there. And I know we've done a lot of work over in Spring Valley to try to control all of that, but it's still impacting the school. Or with some of that funding, is there can we put like additional, like maybe humidifiers or into the school? I mean, I'm not sure how it works because, I don't do that work, but it's a big building. I don't know. Do you put a filter or a humidifier in every classroom? I don't know. I'm just trying to get some information, I guess, from you to better understand what else could we do to so that asthma is a big deal, and and breathing, it's an issue.
Yeah, Ms. Williams, and I apologize, I didn't answer that last part of your question regarding Spring Valley. So I can't tell you that we have a specific program around Spring Valley right now, whether it be within CCSD or with Clark County. However, and I will caveat that this is funding dependent, but we are looking at a much broader district-wide indoor air quality platform.
Okay.
Because like I said, it's mostly invisible to us right now in terms of, levels of particulate would be example of what I think you're speaking about, right?
Yeah.
This is not something that we measure broadly indoors especially. And so, like I mentioned, our environmental services group is leading the effort to propose this project to the district that would allow us to make that visible, potentially down to the classroom level.
Okay.
And then that is kind of where that would be the key to driving action, right? It could be a humidifier. It could be simply that the unit needs to be repaired. It could be broader across schools. So for me, and I don't want to make the statement that that's a panacea, but it could be transformational for how we operate both at Spring Valley, every school.
So this is something that we'll hear about in the coming few months.
Coming few months, yes, it is near term. Like I said, we're starting with portables.
Okay.
because they're outside and consistently opening their doors to the outside and.
Yeah.
But we're also looking internal to the buildings as well.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, then I will wait on that and see what you all have, these big ideas you have planned and then go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other questions for Mr. Campbell? Oh, sorry.
Nicole.
Oh,
Hi.
Nicole? Hi.
This isn't necessarily a question. I just wanted to provide some input and feedback. I recognize that there was a little bit of questioning about work orders and how that goes and what that looks like. And so if I can just offer from the school vantage point, the district has set up a structure where we work collaboratively as a team to ensure that these things that become an area of concern for our community are targeted from a variety of people. So for example, on our campus, in terms of work orders, we have administrators and administrator over facilities and administrative secretary over facilities, our head custodian at the high school level. I believe they have like a building engineer. All of us are working collectively to ensure the safety and to be looking out for type things like air quality and other things that are related to the safety of the facility. And just on the district's end, in terms of what happens when we feel as if we need additional support, I just want to recognize that we are afforded a facilities manager. We have an operations manager. I have even called and asked for assistance at the highest levels of facilities, and no one has ever hesitated to assist us with different work orders and pressure areas of concern. So there is definitely a process in place, and two, as a principal, I know I can't be the boss of every detail, but I do feel confident in the way that the district has structured our process for requesting assistance and even accountability. And so it can work when we're working collaboratively together to address those issues. And we have had some unique things in our space, and I've just been very grateful for that structure and support.
Great, thank you. That's wonderful to hear, and thanks for that clarity and that level of detail. Any additional questions or comments? Thank you again. Moving on to agenda item 2.06, the capital improvement program facility planning. I wanted to see if there's any public comment. Okay. With that being said, we will move to Mr. Baldwin. It's a heavy report, anyway.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, trustee Williams. All right, so we're going to go over CCSD's capacity, enrollments, and planning. This is my annual update on the subject. I know we have several new EOC members, so some of this may be new information for some of you. Next slide. Sorry. Thank you. First, CCSD, we calculate annually the program capacities at all of our schools. This captures changes in educational specifications and or assigned specialized programs that can change annually based on student and school needs. This process uses a standardized student-teacher ratios that's applied at each grade across all programs. Rooms not specified or designated for full-time instruction, such as libraries, multipurpose rooms, offices, teacher workrooms, are not included in that capacity study. And then portable classrooms are also not included for the calculation of capacities. Those detailed reports can be found on the Demographic Zoning and GIS website at dzg.ccsd.net under the Resources tab, and then under the school capacity reports. Next slide. Next, we do a series of enrollment reports. And these we actually do monthly we pull these from the Infinite Campus Student Information Systems. There's 2 different reports we do monthly. Tracy and her team generate these reports. It's the enrollment report, which breaks down enrollments for that school month, or that month, starting at the first school day of the month. And that report breaks down the enrollments at each grade level. Then we also calculate, using that information, also what we call the monthly enrollment report, which looks at the school, the capacity, calculates a percent of capacity for the school, as well as it benchmarks the gains and losses from the first day of school to the current month, so we can monitor and see how the growth is happening and what's happening at each individual school. And I will give an example of this in a second. Once again, those reports can be found, as I said, each month at the dzg.ccsd.net webpage under the resources, and then those are under the enrollment reports. Next slide. So I just have a little section for each of those 2 reports, those enrollment reports. The first section up there at the top is the detailed grade by grade enrollment report. Again, this is the actually one from April. I calculated something first. So looking at this, first I wanted let's see, 1, 2, 3. The third column from the left is the 2022-23 capacity for each of those schools that I included in this example. And you see the grade level enrollments for those schools. These are all elementary schools, again, just for this example here. Going all the way over to the right-hand side, there's the total enrollment for that school using those pre-K through, in this case, 5th grade examples. Then we also have a separate category for the state excluded early childhood students. The reason these are broken out separately, these are early childhood program students. These represent 3 and 4-year-old students, and these are funded differently from the state. So they're calculated differently, so not to be confused with the standard distributive school account calculations. So those numbers are calculated differently there. And then you get the grand total for that total school, which includes those early childhood students. And then finally, on the right-hand side are the number of portable classrooms at each school in that report. So that report then generates the monthly enrollment report, the bottom section there. And this report is considers a total. For this, we include the trustee district on there, the region number is included there. Once again, the capacity, and then the total enrollment for each school month. And going over to the right-hand side, the third from the right is the net enrollment change since September. So this is where, as I mentioned, we track the changes. This is the gain or loss in some situations from the beginning of the school year to the current month, which again, this is April. Then to the right of that is the percent enrolled of capacity, and that is, once again, is that total enrollment. And then once again, the portable classroom calculations. I'll point out that the portable classrooms are the number of classrooms, not necessarily buildings. The majority of our portables are double wides. They normally represent 2 classrooms in a single double wide. We do have a number of single wides that are older, still in our inventory. Next slide, please. So from there, that generates what we refer to as the hotspot maps. I know that these are small. These are just an example. You can't really read too much detail on here. Once again, these reports can be found on our dzg.ccsd.net webpage under resources and hotspot maps. But for just an understanding of these maps, blue on the left-hand side, is the elementary. In the middle are the middle schools, and on the far right are the high school hotspots. The schools highlighted in blue are the attendance zones where the enrollment is below 90% of capacity. Generally, these are schools that have space available on their campus. They have more classroom space than they have students enrolled. Schools that are white represent schools between the 90 and 109% of capacity. This is generally where we want to be. It means they're fairly close to equilibrium, excuse me, if equilibrium is 100%. Schools highlighted in yellow are schools of concern. These are schools above capacity, above 110%, between 110 and 124% of capacity. And then finally, schools highlighted in red are schools above 125% of capacity. These are areas of concern. And when you're looking at this map, when you're looking at these maps, you'll see located within each school zone is highlighted the school name, the percent of capacity, and then below that, the number of total classrooms, once again, in each school. For the conversation with the elementary, you may see some, they're kind of hard to see on here, but some schools that are crosshatched. These represent sister schools where 2 elementary schools share 1 attendance boundary. There are if you're not aware, there are 14 sets of sister schools throughout CCSD. Both are K-5. They share the attendance, the enrollments of the attendance zone. There are 28 total schools, 14 sets. Next slide. All right, now here I included the top graph is a graph of CCSD enrollment since 2000. And you can see there's still that meteoric rise of the early 2000s in the enrollment, and we kind of peak right about 2007, 2008. And anybody that recalls and was been an adult during the Great Recession, it hit about 2007, 2008 school year. To the right, below that, I'm sorry, I included the bar graph for Clark County's total population, just to kind of show the similarities. So, and then to the right is all the data that accompanies both of these. The school year, the enrollment, the delta between the school year and the school year and the previous school year, the plus or minus the enrollments from the previous year, that percent change, then what we had projected for that school year, and then the projected versus actually enrolled delta, plus or minus how close we were to our projection, and then again that variance percentage. Then farther right, I include on this chart the Clark County total populations by those same school years, highlighting the census years, and the percent change of total Clark County population. And then finally, something that I started tracking many years ago was the percent CCSD enrolled students of the total county population. You can see there in 2002, 2001 school year, Clark County's CCSD made up 16.8% of the total Clark County population, where now in 2022-23, Clark CCSD makes up 13.05% of the total population. With the 2022-23 enrollments and the loss of 6,280 students, I'll point out that the majority of that we were anticipating, and that is due to state legislature change in the kindergarten eligibility, which I will go over in more detail on the following slides. Next slide. All right, so I'm throwing a lot of data at you, and there's a lot of information that's going to be included on these slides. So the top chart here, this is CCSD enrollments from school year 2018-19, and then for each year until the current school year, 2022-23, at the bottom of that top chart. Below those, I include bar graph of the elementary middle school, the elementary enrollment on the left-hand side, middle school enrollments bar graph in the middle, and then high school bar graph on the far right. And then in each of these slides, so this is an evaluation that I set up to track those cohorts throughout the year. So I highlight each cohort group so you can see how those change year over year. And so you see let me use the, what was that, purple, the ninth grade, the 2018-19 school year, ninth grade students. The purple, there was 25,112 students enrolled that school year. That was an increase from the previous year's eighth grade of 1,181 students, or almost 5% increase that we saw that school year. Carrying over that same cohort group, you can track and see what happens with that cohort group throughout those students' career in CCSD. I will draw your attention, as I previously mentioned, kindergarten, the 2022-23 school year, so the bottom of that chart, kindergartens, third from the right. Kindergarten enrollment of 18,830 total kindergarten students enrolled. That was a decrease of 2,388 students from the previous year's kindergarten enrollment. Once again, that is representative of the change. The state legislature, essentially the state legislature reduced 2 months worth of eligible children eligible to enter kindergarten for that one specific year once they implemented it. The change was the previous kindergarten cutoff date was students born on or before September 30th. The state law changed to on or before the first day of school, which is early August. So essentially reducing almost 15% student eligibility for that one specific year. Next year, it will rebound and recover, and we will have 100% student eligibility again for all 12 months. Next slide. This is just a different way I wanted to show you and look at this to kind of carry on the conversation. I just put those same of the 2022-23 school year enrollments into a bar graph so you can really see those enrollments and those peaks. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, we have large enrollments in those grades, and you can see the grade levels following are significantly smaller in the upcoming years. So what this means is we will start seeing a reduction in our enrollments in CCSD, specifically at high school level in this. Next slide. All right, now this, once again, another slide chock full of information. So the bar graph represents the students, children born in a birth year. We do recalculate this for the school year, representing August through July as a birth year, as opposed to a calendar year, which you may see similar data represented in a calendar year. So we do that so we can use it to project how many students we anticipate to see in kindergarten. You will see, so that peak year of total births in Clark County of 30,584 children born in Clark County is that peak year. That is school year 2007-2008. Once again, that Great Recession year. Great Recession hits and birth rates start dropping off. The line graph that you see going through those birth bar graph represents once that birth year becomes kindergarten eligible, how many students we actually see who actually enroll in CCSD for their birth year eligibility. So that 30,000 students, we actually only saw 24,400 64, once they were birth eligible in their in their enrollment year of 2020, 2012, 2013. Below that, I included on here what grade those students are currently in, just for comparison, just for perspective. You do see on the left-hand side of that line graph, you see a dip in what is school year 2020, 2021. This is effectively the pandemic year where everyone was at home. We saw a significant reduction in kindergarten enrollments during that year. And then once again, you see the far right on that line graph, that state legislative eligibility change, where once again you saw a reduction in that elementary year. I'll point over, so on the right-hand side, I included the Clark County births by school year. We've had 6 consecutive years of declining births in Clark County. So you can imagine what this is going to mean for enrollments in CCSD. You may, like me, have heard people had said, oh, during the pandemic, we're going to see this birth boom. There was a lot of assumption that people were, we're going to see an increase in birth rates with everyone being staying home. That actually did not happen, and we saw a reduction of 3% in 2021 of births in 2021-22.
I contributed to my family.
Oh.
You heard that big school bus.
Next slide, please. The other big impact are charter schools, and the big question that always comes around charter schools. The top bar graph represents the total state charter school enrollments. These are schools that are sponsored by the state public charter school authority. Almost 60,000 total students enrolled in 2022-23 school year throughout the state in charter schools. CCSD makes up 90% of the charter schools throughout the state. The lower, the bottom half represents the students just within Clark County that are enrolled in charter schools. I will point out, CCSD does sponsor 6 charter schools, 11 total programs itself, which is included in this lower hand section, which is if you may look at this graph, why one is higher than the other, because the state charter authority does not count those CCSD sponsored charter schools in their calculations. So I will point out, I'm going over this really quickly. I know there's a lot of information and we could spend hours going over this. And I just breezed over it before, but CCSD, we do tend to see when we hit in 9th grade, we do tend to see an enrollment increase in that 8th grade to 9th grade, that increases. And if you look on this the charter school enrollments, you see the inverse where they see a decrease in enrollment. So, and working with our partners over at the magnet department, they do tend to see a lot of students returning from charter schools and private schools to enroll specifically in a lot of our career technical and magnet programs. Next slide. All right, so now we get into the 5-year enrollment projections for CCSD. Once again, down below, I include a bar graph of the total based on the elementary is on the far left-hand side, middle school is in the middle, and high school is on the far right-hand side. These are the enrollment projections. Once again, that first grade, so the first grade enrollment and at the top, the enrollment projection for 2023-24 school year. What will now, that lower, the current kindergarten will roll up to first grade, which creates that situation of our low first grade. Also, the 3rd grade of that same cohort group is lower because those were the children during the pandemic year. So what is going to happen, and schools are going to experience this, is as those two cohorts that are significantly smaller than those coming in and below it, before it and after it, they will see adjustments in the number of teachers that they'll need for those specific grade levels. This is going to be a challenge for those elementary schools, and then ultimately middle schools and even high schools once they reach those schools. If you look at the 9th grade, as I previously mentioned, you'll see we do see that enrollment increase, projected increase, where we see more students, 107% increase in 9th grade from the previous year's 8th grade, and that's projected to increase over the next several years as those trends continue. Looking down at the graphs, the bar graphs below, elementary is going to stay relatively flat. I mean, I know with that bar graph, it looks like it's pretty steep, but understanding between that, the valley, the lowest year there, 2024-25 school year, and then the peak there is the 2026-27 school year. That's only a difference of 786 students for the elementary. However, middle school and high school, middle school will see a reduction of almost 4,000, over 4,000 students between 2023 and 2027 as those larger cohort groups roll out and are replaced by significantly smaller cohort groups. And then same thing for the high school. High schools, right now our high schools have the largest, as I had showed previously, those largest cohort, those who were those children born pre-recession, now those, once they all phase out of the system, they're replaced by significantly smaller cohort grade levels in the upcoming years. So high school will see a reduction of 6,316 students. Of course, this is all based on current trends, different things, not any number of factors can impact what these projections look like. Next slide. All right, so this is just an example of our development tracking. This is where our team, Tracy's team, Demographic Zone and GIS, look at, we track all residential developments throughout all of Clark County. And we break it just a simple, this is an example of the Sky Canyon area. This is up in the northwest part of the valley. And so we track it and break it down into different categories, and this is the high level overview. We do analyze this data very significantly. What we look at is what we refer to, and you may see it on the map as green. These are what we refer to as active residential developments. These are currently selling, leasing, or renting. These are very important for us for actually monitoring and anticipating enrollment projections for the next school year or even the next few school years, because those are students we're going to see right now. Inactive represent developments that have filed for development, however, they're currently not active and may have been put on hold due to the pandemic for whatever reasons. The builder just has not moved on those projects just yet. And then future developments represent those that have submitted tentative maps. We know that they're coming. These generally reflect a master plan developer. We know that they plan to build homes in those areas, but these are going to be a few years out. So we use that to plan more long-term, typically, 5 years and more with those. We track these units in single-family units, and these are reflected on the map. Over each development, you'll see a yellow number over development that represents the number of single-family units, the yellow number of single-family units in that development. And then we track multifamily units, and multifamily you'll see on the map in a white number over the residential development project. Finally, two other terms that we look at and we consider, the absorption rate, how quickly those developments are actually selling their homes, how quickly they're occupied and how soon we anticipate seeing students moving into those areas. And then we also track the remaining units. So as those get occupied, that reduces the total remaining of the total project in a development area. Next slide. All right, so
Sorry, of course, wanted to chime in, is from this page right here, is there a way to know which ones are part of like the affordable housing neighborhoods? That way it can go along with this report that you're doing?
we did, not specifically on this example, but we do track that,
Okay.
and we look at those considerably too, because an affordable housing project, I was actually, it's part of my next slide,
Okay,
to kind of get into those conversations, next slide, thank you.
Okay.
So let me get into this, no, I'm sorry, back, thank you. So student yields, the student yields is actually, the magic for projecting and anticipating that future student growth. And this is a calculation, I just threw it on here, here it is, here's all the math. What we look at, and we receive from Clark County Comprehensive Planning, the Southern Nevada Consensus Occupied Housing Unit Counts. We break this down into different categories, they break this down into different categories: single family, multiplex, mobile homes, apartments, townhomes, and condominiums. These are the typical dwelling units that are tracked throughout Clark County. For our intents and purposes, we break these into just two different categories, as I previously mentioned on the other side: single family versus multifamily. Single family represents those single family homes, mobile homes, and then townhomes. Those are in that single family classification. Multifamily are apartments, multiplexes, and condominiums. Using that, we look at our CCSD student population. We break down our student population into the single family and multifamily categories within the elementary, middle, and high school grade groups. And then that gives us our CCSD district-wide average student yields. So for student yield, this is represented in the lower left hand corner box for the 2022-23 school year. So elementary school is a 0.148. Essentially, this is a 15%. So for every 100 single family homes, on average, we expect to see 15 elementary school students enroll in CCSD schools. In multifamily would be 13.4. We would, round up or down in those situations when calculating students. And then I wanted to include, to really just paint this picture, what's happening in the lower right-hand box. This is the history, student yield history from 2010 to 2022. And what I want to point out here, so those single family, I know it's a lot of numbers to look at. Please follow with me. 2010-11 school year is that first box, and so the K through 5 that represents elementary schools. We were yielding at that time in 2010 21 students per every 100 homes. Okay. So follow that all the way over to the 2022-23 school year. That number has now dropped to a little less than 15%. For that same grade group. I could really go in, you can look at the multifamily. That number has increased the number of students up to, let's see, peaked at 14, almost 15% in 2016-17 school year. And then now has actually come down a little bit to 13.34% here in 2022 in elementary school category. So this is the tool we use to calculate the number of students we expect to see from these areas. Now I'll point out this is a district-wide average. This is based on district-wide averages. Averages being what they are. To Mr. Cameo's point, there are various things that can affect those: price point, product type. Nearby charter schools and/or private schools can drastically have an impact on how that is expected to yield at a specific school. So Mr. Cameo, an affordable housing project tends to see more students than this average, but then $1 million homes are going to tend to see much fewer students.
Yeah.
So again, averages being what they are. And next slide. So future plan, I just wanted to give you a list here, just kind of put it all out here. This is the future planning of the replacement school schedule that Justin's team is diligently working on, getting these all handled and planned. 2024-25 school year, Bennett Elementary School, Mountain View Elementary School, Red Rock Elementary School, Thomas, and then we begin phase 1 of the Las Vegas Academy project. I'm not going to read all these. I don't think we need me to do that.
But these are just replacements, so these
This is
are
just replacement.
anticipated to be like for like. Not that there may be a slight shift in total capacity, but not necessarily.
Where and
anything significant.
when we need to, we are right sizing these for the enrollments, or even the future planned enrollments of the school. So in some of these situations, the school needs more capacity than they previously had. In some situations, they may need fewer. Like as I pointed out,
Right.
middle schools over the next 5 years, we're going to see almost 5,000 students decrease.
Right.
So a middle school may currently have an enrollment of 1,200 students.
Right.
In 5 years, we anticipate they'll probably be down to about 1,000. So we plan to build for.
So you're taking out the district and drilling it down to the individual
Yeah,
communities and schools. Okay.
Yes, this is, I'm trying to be high level. I know this is
I
a
get it,
lot,
I get
but
it.
we actually are able to look at every school. We actually are able to track. I can tell you how many kindergarten students are enrolled in the zone in what we anticipated 12 years from now in a high school.
Right.
Okay, next slide. As Ms. Charlton pointed out, that was just a replacement list. This is the future planned new schools list. I realized I inadvertently left out the St. Jude's school from this list.
That's a
So-
specific population.
It's a very specific and unique population, and it wasn't at the forefront of my mind for the purposes of my presentation here. 2023, we discussed it earlier, the Northeast Career Technical Academy. This adds a total of 1,800 total seats. 2026, the South CTA scheduled the 2027-28, the Southwest Comprehensive High School that should add 2,700 student seats. Excuse me. Also, that same year, 2027-28, the Robeson Replacement Choice High School program that is scheduled to be 1,000 seats. The Northwest Comprehensive High School scheduled for 2028-29, once again, 2,700 seats. That's the standard comprehensive high school size. And then the 2029-30, the Southeast Career Technical, Southeast Choice High School program. We're trying not to, with these choice high school, we're trying not to pigeonhole necessarily. They'll operate as some function similar to a magnet type program, but we're trying to be very vague and allow our instruction team to design those programs to be what's needed for the community. And then finally, the West Choice High School in 2030-31. Next slide, and I will just leave off on this. We are directed by our Focus 2024 goal, sound fiscal management, operations 1.06, begin the process of redistributing the student population, make maximum use of current infrastructure, and preclude creating unnecessary infrastructure. So this is a directive that we've been given, and ultimately what this means is we have to look at, before we go and plan for the new school, we have to look at available seats, and the public may not like it, they generally don't. We had a situation this year we had an elementary school that was at 120% of capacity. An adjacent school zone was at 70% of capacity. So that pushes that school rezoning to utilize that available capacity at that zone. So that's it. I'll take any questions. I know it was a lot.
You should probably take a breath and maybe drink the water. So let's open it remotely to see if there are some questions for Mr. Baldwin, please. Any questions? Oh, Nicole, you're the
I do
middle
have
of-
some, but I'm willing to wait my turn.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just wanted to turn around just to make sure we don't miss anyone, but, okay, so are you okay if we go first? Okay, so Gina, we'll start with you and then, to, Ms. Williams, you bet. So Gina?
Thank you, Rick. There's a heck of a lot of information there, and it's great to see all of that. And I think it also helps in terms of being able to kind of explain to the public why decisions are made to the extent that they're made. So thank you for all of that. I do have a couple of things. So one of the things that I've heard out in the community is that promises made by developers in particular regarding a school will be built here or whatnot. How does that kind of like factor into those conversations? What sort of communication do you hear about what developer promises might be about certain land or area? Because I feel like there's definitely a disconnect there between expectations of what people are being taught and told versus, kind of where we stand.
Ms. Blackman-Taylor, that's a lot. We do work with the master plan developers. Many of them do set aside land in development agreements with us for use. A lot of times they get aggravated because if the bond funds aren't there in the past, when we didn't have bond funds, we couldn't build the schools in the timely manner that they wanted to see them. Then oftentimes they then give lands, sell lands, and bring in a charter school, which ultimately then changes our need if a charter school comes in and then greatly reduces our need in an area. So it's a lot of a catch-22 in that, planning in those areas for what everybody wants. And yes, I mean, developers, builders, they're out to sell homes, and they're gonna tell the community a school is planned here when we have not necessarily designated a school site and actually began the process of building a school in that area or, set any timelines to such a thing.
So to that point then, I mean, I'm assuming these developers are having to go before these planning commissions with their ideas and their planning. Is there a way or a mechanism already for kind of communicating to these planning commissions what the reality might be of that situation, or where developers might need to provide extra support in order to make their promises a reality?
Our team meets with the commission members, city councilmen, and we discuss our needs and desires and such things. But sometimes they listen to us, sometimes they don't.
Okay, fair enough. That drop off from, as we see from 9th to 10th that accelerates 11th and 12th, does that reflect dropouts or people leaving for private school? Or do you have any information about that?
Do you drop off from where?
As we're starting to see, 9th, we see this big kind of influx of kids, and then 10th, and it seems to have a drop off as we get to 10th, but particularly 11th and 12th. And I'm just wondering if, we know particularly in elementary school that charter, tends to kind of take a big chunk of that do we know that if that comes, that drop off per cohort, is that coming from people who are dropping out of school entirely?
So, okay, so not necessarily. Yes, they would be included in that group, but it's inclusive of early graduations as well. There are a number of students that are able to get their credits and graduate early, or transfer to other programs. Maybe it'll be students that recognize years ago, and I don't know if it's still the case. I heard there were a number of students that were leaving CCSD and going to, an adjacent state because they had easier graduation requirements than we had. So they were leaving just to be able to reach those goals for graduation. I don't know if that's still the case, but the big one is that we have a lot of, currently our out migration is exceeding our in migration. So ultimately, that's the biggest category. Generally, families, again, as a general statement, families are more inclined to move as children are younger. As children get older in high school, they're going to be less inclined to pull them out of a high school that already have established and moving from state to state or even within the district. So that they tend to not move quite as much as you would with the younger cohort groups. So then when they do, it becomes more noticeable, I think, in those higher grade levels.
Okay, I have two more quick things. So one, how has this updated, and I understand you update this information on a regular basis, and maybe this is more of a question for Mark, but do you see a need to kind of do that revision 5.B or in terms of like where this has come with the capital improvement plan and whether or not that reflects any need for changes?
I'm happy to jump in on that, Ms. Blackman-Taylor. I think yes, I mean, the main purpose of this, right, is to help guide the BOC on, our future planning and use of the bond funds. And so I wouldn't actually refer to it as 5B. I would just say revision 6. For sure enough time has passed. And I think it should be something that's on our mind, or I should say the committee's mind, right, now and going forward. And I think, I just think it should be something that is considered, and the time is probably right for that.
Thank you. And then finally, Rick, I'm somebody that really finds the visual of the hot map to be a really effective visual tool for me with these presentations. And I'm trying to remember from past, but do you ever do kind of like what a future hot map would look like depending on how these things kind of play out, or like a proposed hot map, or do you find that would just be too much and too confusing?
We do not do that typically. I do think it would be confusing and potentially dangerous in certain situations. Dangerous to the goals and objectives as we try to achieve certain things.
Can you clarify on that? Because you have some projections, and I kind of like where Gina's going on this, is that you've got projections even at the high school level out through perhaps 27, 28, and even further out. So what, I guess, unless you can't get to that level of data, to kind of revisit the slide on page 5 of 18, bringing that forward based on what you provided in some of the data. Is that where you were going, Gina? Yeah.
Yeah, because I know how especially in the revision 5 presentation, you very nicely stepped us forward from, years past as you, and that visual of showing
Oh.
how effective the program had been up until now was nice. Did you
Yeah,
lose me?
we lost you for just a quick second, so, but we got you.
But I found that progression to be a really effective tool. And so I guess part of me wonders like, oh, is there a way to kind of use that same sort of like step by step to show, hey, if we continue on this path, this is kind of what we're looking at. But I definitely understand what you mean in terms of it feeling like perhaps it ends up, I'm guessing it seems as if the concern is maybe that's making too much of a promise or guarantee about something that doesn't have a guarantee.
Well, and Ms. Blackman Taylor, to my points of it's dangerous, if we were to generate this, we would show something. So for instance, charter schools, we have no say where and when charter schools open in certain areas. So if we're showing, we put out a map that says this school is going to be overcrowded. We're essentially telling charter schools, hey, you should go open up here. If they do, then we no longer have a need. If we therefore cited a school in that area, they also open a charter school, then we've really saturated the area in the seat capacity for that area. So that's just a simple example of the major concern I would have with generating such a thing.
Great.
Now,
Thank you.
We do look at that, if I will say. So we do. We've worked on projecting and looking at what's going to happen in these certain areas. Also, home sales, mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are at an all-time high. I think they are starting to come down. I've heard things are starting to stabilize. The inflation rates. These are things that greatly impact. So we could project it, but there are so many outside influences that can. Another global pandemic, no, dear God, no. But these are things that could put us in a dangerous situation if we try to use that and put it out in the public and too abruptly.
Okay.
Thank you. That was it for me. And again, I appreciate this work and effort.
Great, thank you. Yvette.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I stepped on you.
Start to you, Yvette, and then move to Nicole.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to just commend you. I love data-driven reports. I enjoyed the entire report, but I'm one of those data nuts. I love it, and I can't wait to. I actually printed it out so I can look at it a little later and do some comparisons and some analysis for myself. But in that, so I commend you for an excellent report. Thank you so much. And I could have sat through more, but but anyway, I would like to go into my colleague's question around affordable housing. And you said that you do have that information. Would it be possible for you to maybe email us that one slide with the affordable housing included in that? Is that something you can do, or am I asking too much?
Ms. Williams, it's not generated like that. It's not a simple report. For instance, we track, when we're doing the development tracking, in the development tracking, we'll highlight, we'll know that a certain development is a Nevada HAND project, which is a local affordable housing project. We just highlight that. When it gets filed and submitted to us, we just highlight that. And then we know that those tend to exceed that normal district-wide average. It's not a specific product that we produce.
Okay, so then in that map, in other words, you can't produce that same map that Gina loves so much with maybe a little ping or some designation of those that are affordable housing.
I'm not saying we couldn't. I just don't know that we should be the source for that. I think there are other organizations that could probably provide those better than we could.
Okay, could you then offline just email me or let me know where I could get that?
Sure.
Okay.
Southern Nevada Housing Authority.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing I wanted to ask, I know that our city leaders or our county leaders are hoping to expand Clark County by 1 million residents in the next 10 years. In your calculations, was that, is there any kind of, other than just looking at what's being built, is there any other methodology that you use in determining our population growth over the next 10 years?
Yeah, so Ms. Williams, I actually sit on those groups, UNLV's Center of Business and Economic Research. They do. I'm a part of that group that conducts and calculates those district-wide or county-wide projections.
Why I'm not surprised.
We sit and we talk and we geek out. You would really enjoy those conversations.
I probably would.
Let's really get into some really high-level stuff. Persons per household, jobs per, per resort corridor units, and it's really fascinating work. But I am always looking at what we're projecting and how it aligns with what they're projecting, which is what actually drove me to, I pointed out that earlier slide where I looked at the county population and the CCSD enrollment, and that's what actually brought me to look at it in that type of situation.
Okay, so we did account for that. Now going to what you just said, where you had your comparison of enrollment by based on population, do you have a comparison by school age population so that we can see the percentage of enrollment by school age population? So I know we account for in the charter schools, we can see, oh, okay, the comparison in charter school enrollment is this. But what about those schools that are students who are homeschooled, maybe not even in school? Would be interesting to kind of see what that looked like too as a comparison, just a suggestion. I mean, I don't know, no one else might be interested, but I would kind of be interested in to see how close we are to that number. And that's just a comment. You don't have to respond to that. The other thing I wanted to ask about was housing insecure population. I know we're looking at projections and we're counting in, but what about, we have a large housing insecure population.
I agree. Yes. I don't. Is there a question there? Or are you
yeah, well, I was just wondering if we are accounting for those in our when you were doing the development tracking.
I don't understand your question.
So I guess what I'm asking is, are we taking into account those who may not be in a home, a single family home or a multi-family home?
So in the students, on the student record, yes. I mean, we track and we know the student population that are homeless.
And so that number is calculated in here in those numbers that you showed for enrollment, for projected enrollment.
For projected enrollment, yes, of course.
Okay. And then also for the Southwest Comprehensive location, do we know what area that is? And you might have already told us at previous meetings, but I don't remember.
The Southwest Comprehensive High School is in Mountains Edge Master Plan Community at Buffalo and Cactus.
Buffalo and Cactus.
Okay. It's adjacent to the county regional park that's already in that area.
Oh, okay. All righty. And then lastly, is there any plans for Gray Elementary? And how old is that? Because I know that my house was built in '78 and that school's been here since.
Gray Elementary School, or replacement, or what?
Yeah.
There's nothing that off the top of my head that I recall. I don't know if it's.
I see all these other schools being replaced that are old, and I'm asking, has Gray Elementary been discussed as far as replacing? Or where does it lie? What is the plan for Gray Elementary?
I don't know that I can answer that at this time, and
Okay.
or where it fits on the
These are the ones that are on the revision.
This is,
that
these
we're
are,
working
these are the currently planned, yes.
Mhm. So I'm asking, is there any discussion about Gray Elementary? Where do they fit in?
Ms. Williams, I would just say broadly speaking, it would be among the schools, assuming the age is reflected in an FCI that was higher. We would look at whether it needed an assessment for a comprehensive renovation, modernization, or whether it would be needed to be considered for, something like placement. And again, as we talk about a CIP 6, if we have schools that need to be added to that list, if it was prioritized among others, given its FCI and its program capabilities, we could look at that. But specifically, now, there's nothing.
Okay, could someone then look into Gray Elementary and go kind of where it is in the plan, or if it's in the plan, or what has been done to assess Gray Elementary and its needs, and let me know?
Sure, we can do that.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nicole?
I don't really have a question, more a comment from the school vantage point. I just want to say thank you to Rick for being ahead of the game for all of these years. This is my 21st year as an administrator in the Clark County School District, and I have depended on these demographics and zoning reports from year to year. I think as a whole group, we have to be hopeful, because even though we can't predict where maybe kids are charter school or private school, I think the district is doing a beautiful job really ensuring that every school is a great school for kids. And if there are seats open, perhaps you work near a school, you would be able to do the change of school, the change of school request. And I think that as families are becoming more familiar with the programming and the way that we are so dedicated to kids, I do believe kids will come back to the district. And even if it's not directly to say their zone school, maybe their parent works near a school, or maybe there's a program at a school that they like, or what have you. I think that all of these investments in students' academic and social emotional growth will increase student enrollment. But I also think when you look at something, for example, like his map, say, of middle schools are well populated. They're not on the hot seat for anything. So as we begin attracting people back to the Clark County School District, it is very helpful to have those reports and those maps to see where we have opportunities to grow enrollment at specific schools. So there's a variety of ways that I think this kind of reporting is very helpful, and it leaves me with hope. We'll add more kids to seats.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. Questions, comments in the room? So Abraham?
Is this report available in Spanish for our community?
Presentation?
Yes. It's very well. I love the numbers and everything. I would like to see if it's available, like either on a link or on our website, so that way our Spanish community and other members of our community can access this and read it. I think it would be very helpful if it would be available. If it's not,
I can speak to that, Mr. Cameo. We can make that happen. We do have an office that does that. It has been a increasing frequency that we've been doing that for the board meetings. This one would not be that hard, actually, given that it's mostly
numbers. Yeah.
So this one would be a really easy ask. It does take a few weeks for them to turn it around, probably.
Okay, I would love this report in Spanish, and I could literally see myself showing this to other members of our community.
Yeah.
That was it. I love it.
Just a few. First, I think on behalf of all of us, Rick, we wanted to really thank you so much for that heavy level of detail, and I think we all geek out a little bit, but this is the one that I know that many of us look forward to every single year, because it really helps to put into perspective the role that we have as it pertains to, and I appreciate Mark's comments also about looking at this is probably the right time for us to relook at the next revision. For example, in looking at the future planning of new schools, I know that that's not totally complete because there was some placeholders for other schools as well. And then also putting that and layering it back to page 5 of 18, where you see, and I am like Gina, I like that heat map because it really kind of shows that those pressure points. But when I look at some of these schools that are planned, the time frame that we're looking at, as well as the type of schools, but also looking at where those white areas are that perhaps we don't necessarily need some of what may be planned but need to reshift, especially when you look at the level of red, the yellows, and then you also look forward thinking. It kind of gives us a reason to pause before we get too far down and before we make commitments on some of these, because we know that any kind of level of a high school can be much more expensive than it can be at other levels, and perhaps there's some schools that we may have or may have been included in the revision that perhaps maybe aren't needed in that framework, and maybe look more at a comprehensive in another location. This question, I think we're really fortunate also that for the first time, the Bond Oversight has a member of AZAC, the zoning committee as well, at the table with us. So it does sound like, even though it was a slide and perhaps it's a teaser, or perhaps there is something that's underway, what is the current process, or what is the timeline for looking at zoning with the data that you have provided and that projection out with perhaps it's UNLV's research area, but I know there's also a statewide and a countywide demographer that also looks at some of those projections. So what does that process look like right now? And is that, I don't think it's actively being looked at for rezoning, and that is a very, very difficult thing for families. But what is the timeline for that?
So, Ms. Charlton, the standard practice by the CCSD regulations for zoning, the process starts in August once we start the school year. Typically, AZAC doesn't start meeting until September, and then the zoning season, we call it the zoning season, runs from September. We break it down into 3 different categories. The scenario phase, which are just ideas that AZAC will then look at what they're looking at in zoning, what they're trying to accomplish, what might provide the best goal, the best options to achieve the goals they have for them. Before winter break, AZAC then needs to develop, narrow down their scenarios to proposals, just like 2, maybe 3 proposals per area that they're looking at. This solidifies that zoning concept. Those proposals go out to the public, to the parents in that area for evening public input meetings that are held in January. From there, AZAC sits there listening to the public's comments on those proposals. From there, they develop one final recommendation to the superintendent and school board trustees, which the school board trustees then, by regulation, approves zoning for the following school year before March, within the first week of March of that school year.
Okay.
So that's that process in an overview.
Yeah, but it does sound like that might be something that is being considered. Okay. And we feel for the trustees, for the district, and for those that participate in that, because we know it's very, very difficult. So, okay, I don't have any other questions. I probably have more information requests from this, but want to be respectful of time because we are coming up to the top of our time that we had scheduled today, and so wanted to move this forward. We've always got future agenda planning. We need to utilize that. But thank you on behalf of all of us for such a thorough report. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 2.07, questions on and or removal of items on motions and taskings. First, wanted to see if there's any public comment.
Madam Chair, I have an update on our first motion and tasking, the analysis of district costs and savings. I have met with Dr. Barton and his team is working on this actively. And I spoke with him again yesterday, and we're looking at an ETA for the presentation of June or July. And so he will be reaching out to facilities to work with them and you, Madam Chair, to get it on agenda for either June or July.
Great, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. And then on the second one, I'd like to ask for an ETA because I know we've been working on this since 20. And I know, it takes a while to do this kind of work, but when will we finally get a plan? I know we have a consultant. I see it says Trustee Williams may provide an update. So I don't know if she's still on the call, but if she's able, I'd like to know where we are on how we're progressing on this, or whoever can give us an update.
I think Mr. Campbell may have a status for us, and then we can refer to Trustee Williams.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'm still on the call. Yeah, I can do that. I can get with Mr. Campbell and hopefully get that for you.
And quick, see that you defer to me.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so Ms. Williams and Trustee Williams, we are towards the tail end of our work with Keene Industries. We have a tentative presentation from them coming to the Board of Trustees at the second board meeting in May. I do say tentative because sometimes these agendas do change, so it may be later than that, but I don't want to overstep. Trustee Williams likely has not been briefed on this yet, so she probably, I don't know, she may have an update, but it will be coming to the Board of School Trustees in the very near future.
Would you be so kind to make sure that we all get notification of when that will be on agenda?
Yes, you can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, just to clear up, if it's the second board meeting in May, the trustees actually won't be briefed on it until right before they post it for public notice.
Okay. All right, thank you. And we know that this is a district-wide study that is not exclusive to capital, but is a part of an overall strategy and approach, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we're looking forward to that. And I think that was always kind of the commitment, is that when this reporting goes back to the full board, that the bond oversight would be made aware, as well as other members of the public that may want to observe and watch that presentation and provide appropriate public comment. So thank you. And then
Thank you.
Thanks. And then the last one is, do we have any update? Chad, I think this is one that was already underway. This is kind of looking at costing of just a total elementary, middle, and high school, I believe. We know that we can't necessarily go down to the level of trades because of the way that the contracting works. Is that?
Yeah, it's all kind of broken out by CSI divisions, which is a standard construction and industry standard, and like different sections of wood, plastic, metals, doors, all that fun. We'll get to a certain level of detail there, but we can't necessarily break it out by, say, material versus labor.
So one of the things that Rodney and I looked at a little while back that I'm happy to I mean, I can share with Gina, and I maybe can set something on the outside of this. Well, I looked at an example of it was a little bit off topic here, but it wasn't like template costing of these schools. It was more an analysis of cost increases. And so what we did was we kind of pulled a similar, not like for like, but a similar school that was recently built to one that was towards the end in progress, to see current cost increases versus something previous, to see kind of where those increases are at, and does it look reasonable in the environment that we're in right now. And I mean, so this was I think Gina's request here, but I mean, for what that's worth, I'm happy to speak to you on that, Gina, if that's interesting to you.
Yeah, I mean, and just a reminder of the context of this question. It came from a place of being asked by members of the community of like, well, why does the school cost that much, sort of thing? And that was like kind of that precursor question. So being able to, once that project is completed, taking a look at where those expenditures were and how much because from my understanding, when we are talking about that budget projection and those numbers, it's not so much how we're comparing what's budgeted to how it turns out. It's more of okay, being able to give a tool to the public and to myself of understanding and being able to communicate why a school costs what it does to build, because that is the basis of a lot of the questions that not a lot of those are the basis of some of the questions that I get regarding the expense of these schools. So being able to take a look at it and say, this is why, and I understand it doesn't break down in terms of labor and materials, but it's also knowing the actual cost of something is a hard number versus, those kind of projected bids.
So this is just, Gina, this is my opinion, and you guys can disagree if you feel differently. I think there's probably a level of detail that you wouldn't want to share publicly on someone's specific job, right? There's a level of detail in a continuation, type of a report from a contractor that should not be shared in this forum. Again, I looked at some of that as my role as liaison that I wouldn't bring to this, right? Like I'm not sharing a contractor's fee structure and things like that, right? I just don't think it's appropriate. But again, Gina, I'm like, if you want to look at some of what I looked at, I'm happy to share that, and it is to a pretty fine level of detail that I have.
Respond to the question about how a cost is determined.
Yeah. Or at least it would show a couple examples of school that was built from a few years ago to compared to a school that's I think just recently finished, right? And how that cost structure has evolved in those years. But I personally don't feel comfortable sharing that in this forum.
So perhaps an off-cycle conversation to kind of vet through some data.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that sound good?
I'm open to that. I'm not open to removing that item yet then, because I feel like, again, this is something that we had a conversation on where it felt like it was perhaps, not I don't mind following up and then finding out if this is then no longer appropriate, but I'm not willing to, or I'm not keen on taking that off at the moment.
And I'm not, I can't speak for you guys. I'm not prepared to give a presentation here, right? But that's just, the question was asked to me on work that I've looked at as in my role as liaison. But please, I think you guys can jump in on what,
I'd like to be able to sit with you and Gina and kind of start there as a basis where we can talk about things to that same granular level. And figure out, okay, is this enough information, or how do we kind of want to move forward after we have that discussion?
And what level can be shared, because obviously there's a purchasing process and anything that would be a public records request would go through that, not through somebody. So.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, and Gina, I wasn't looking to remove anything, just wanted to make sure that we were at least touching base and seeing where we were at this time. And so at this point, we have those 3 items that we'll continue to have on the motions and taskings.
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so moving on to agenda item 2.08, future agenda planning. Is there any public comment? And is there anything from the Bond Oversight Committee that they would like to have considered as a future agenda? I know we have had the full agenda today. We have some items that Mr. Campbell shared with us that will be coming back to this body, and then some standing items as well. So is there anything from the committee?
If we got facilities, maybe help out with this, but can we possibly get a list of how many current metal detectors we have in our school district? From the walkthrough ones and even the bonds? That's a question that was brought up with my trustee, and so that way we can start this conversation of what we already have and then moving forward to what we might need to purchase or what the trustees might need to consider. Like for example, there's X amount of metal detectors at high schools. You know, how much does like Rancho High School have? How many do Las Vegas High School
I'm
have?
assuming we may not want to go down to the granular level at each school for security
Yeah,
purposes.
I was gonna say, I think that the right path to make that request is probably a public records request, as opposed to coming through facilities and trying to distribute it through email. Because I wouldn't be comfortable sharing that.
Okay, that's something that you can share with
The process?
with us as a process through email and not public. So and that way we're not going through touch on security protocols, I guess.
Like I said, I think the reason I say public records request is because they will decide what is the proper level of information that we can share.
Is that
And they
actually,
will go to the right people who have that information.
so it may be, for example, it may be CCSD police, not facilities?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yvette, I see that you have your hand raised.
I do, and just correct, because I know I wasn't here for the January meeting, but I thought we were going to talk about our bylaws.
Yeah, and as I meant, yeah, we did talk about that and bringing back a bylaw revision. I do apologize. I have been not available for a couple of months due to a family situation, emergency. So yes, that is still on the plan to bring it back before the end of this academic year.
Okay, just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So moving on to item number 3.01, public comment on items not listed as action items on the agenda. Is there any public comment? Valerie, did we have any online? Oh, just shake, yeah. Valerie has no voice if you cannot hear her remotely. Okay, so that was an information item. Okay, next we will move to agenda item 4, moving for an adjournment. Does anyone make a motion to adjourn our meeting today?
Abraham, for the record, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
So very much. So we will see you at the career building at our main meeting, correct? Okay. And please look for information from staff. Thank you so much for your time. And
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
you too.